Imagine with me a whole family mysteriously disappearing in an instant, leaving no trace or complaint behind. Then, after several days, the sea reveals one corpse, after another hour, a second corpse is found, and after a third hour, a third corpse appears. The shock was that the victims were tied with ropes and weighed down with heavy stones so that they wouldn't float to the surface. However, one event completely turned the case around. The case remained unsolved for over 26 years despite occurring in 1989, and its events continued until 2015. Would you like to know how the events of all these years were recorded and how the truth was uncovered? Follow along with me. In the episode, to understand what happened in a state called Ohio, there lived a family of 4, the father, the mother, and 2 daughters. They resided on a vast farm that housed many livestock and chickens, and they managed all the agricultural work by themselves. They fed the animals, took care of the chickens, and maintained cleanliness along with all the other endless tasks. However, the father was opposed to the idea of hiring a worker to help them, insisting that he and his wife were enough to handle all the work. As for his daughters, one was 14 years old and the other 17, and they began to help despite the fatigue and exhaustion. The father repeatedly urged them to hire someone to assist on the farm, saying, "The entrance to the farm is narrow, and if we can manage with the expenses, living costs, feed, and the costs of maintaining the livestock and chickens." For this reason, the father insisted on not hiring anyone, while the mother and daughters remained silent regarding this request. The father spent his days working on the farm, and in the evenings he would go out for coffee to change the atmosphere slightly. One day, the daughters kept pleading with their mother, saying, "Please, ask our father to hire someone to help with the farm work so that we can all travel together to Florida." The mother replied that they all knew well that their father did not want to leave the farm to anyone unless he was prepared to travel alone, and in the end the daughters insisted until the father agreed. His response was strange, as he said without any preamble, "Go if you wish, but I will not accompany you." His wife added that they wanted to travel all together, but the father confirmed that he would not leave the farm no matter what. The journey was long and the road very far, so the father agreed that it was necessary to appoint someone to oversee the farm work during their absence. He told his wife, "I will stay here and complete my work, and you manage your affairs on your own." The wife agreed and said, "Take me with the daughters to travel and change the atmosphere, but I will not be away for many days." The daughters were very happy with this decision. The next day, the father gathered the daughters and gave them some money, and then they all traveled together to the state of Florida, where the distance was approximately 1,500 kilometers. They did not travel by plane but by car, and they arrived safely. They checked into a hotel to rest from the fatigue of the journey, and the next day they went out to explore the surroundings and to watch the sea and the sunset that captivated their hearts, especially the daughters for whom this was their first trip. After the predetermined duration of the trip, it was time to return home. However, their return did not occur as expected. The father's negligence prevailed, as he did not call them or inquire about their well-being, which is strange for someone traveling with his family to not care about their safety. Meanwhile, some tourists were sailing on their yachts in the sea, and while they were enjoying the atmosphere, they noticed something strange floating on the surface of the water, the corpse of a woman in an advanced state of decomposition. Rescue teams from the Coast Guard rushed to the scene, and when they arrived, they found that the victim's hands were tied with a yellow rope and her feet were also bound with the same rope, which was further secured with heavy stones to keep her anchored at the bottom of the sea. Thus, a horrifying crime was revealed that remains not fully understood. While the forensic and Coast Guard teams were searching the same area, they found nothing that could lead them to the perpetrator. The shock of the case was that when they began their search, they again discovered the corpse of a girl in a gruesome state. Then, unfortunately, they found another girl's corpse in the same condition, her hands and feet tied with the same rope, and she too was bound to a stone so that she would not surface, having reached an advanced stage of decomposition. When they cleared the area, they found a third girl's corpse in exactly the same condition. To date, 3 victims have been found who were killed by the perpetrator in the same manner and at the same location. A shocking forensic report indicated that the victims shared similar characteristics, and that the perpetrator left his victims alive, as evidenced by their lungs being red from being filled with water. The report also clarified that the perpetrator had tied the victims with ropes to drown them one by one, and it is certain that the victims saw one another while drowning. The report added that the perpetrator had assaulted the victims before they drowned. The Coast Guard continued to search for additional victims, but they found nothing. Further investigations enabled them to identify the victims as the mother and her 2 daughters who had traveled to change the atmosphere. The strange thing is that the police found no trace of the family. Even before the police arrived, the father had discovered the hotel where the victims were staying. The police then went to the hotel and questioned the manager of the apartment in which they were staying, and the manager stated that their stay was for 3 days, and that all their belongings were still in the room and had not been cleared out. The investigators collected everything related to the victims from that room and kept it, then summoned the father, who was in another city. When he arrived, they found him at his farm, where the officers recognized him, but he did not display any reaction. When asked why he was the only one present when the police arrived, as if he were talking to himself, he replied, "I'm speaking with them in a detached manner." When questioned about his wife and daughters, he said, "They are traveling." Then, when asked about their destination, he answered, "To Florida." The man spoke very coldly, as if he were indifferent, as though everyone were waiting for the police to arrive. He was asked again about what was happening, but he did not respond. The strangest thing was that his wife and daughters did not appear at the expected time of their return, and there was no communication from them. Moreover, the police never contacted them at all, which astonished everyone. When asked when he had last spoken with them, he replied, "I haven't spoken with them, maybe about a week ago." When questioned about the duration of their trip, he said, "About 14 days." And when asked about their return date, they stated that they would come back on a certain day of the month. When the police inquired that day, they received no clear answer, which made them suspicious of the man's cold demeanor and his lack of concern regarding what had happened. The problem for the police was that the man showed no interest or sorrow. He merely stated, "I don't have time to grieve or be affected. I have too much work on this farm." His reaction shocked everyone, even though the police suspected something might be off with his mental state. When they inquired about him from relatives and acquaintances, everyone said he was a normal man who never exhibited any unusual behavior, despite his indifference and coldness making him a subject of suspicion. He behaved as if nothing had happened, showing no sign of sadness or fear in his features, and he answered all the investigators' questions succinctly, without adding an extra word, as if his mind were solely occupied with the farm's work. He mentioned that after finishing his work on the farm, he would go to a restaurant to eat because he didn't have time to cook. After verifying his daily schedule, the police determined that he had no involvement in any misdeeds, which deepened the mystery. Later, he went to the restaurant. The restaurant owner stated that he dined at the same time every day, and the cafe owner said that the man came every evening and spent about an hour before leaving. Investigators confirmed from this daily schedule that the man had no connection to the crime, despite his cold behavior, which allowed him to continue his normal life. He even appeared in a press interview, speaking and laughing as if nothing had happened. Subsequently, the police continued their investigations in Florida. As for the belongings of the mother and her daughters that the investigators found at the hotel, they were seized. Through the mother's car, parked at a small marina, the police found 2 pieces of paper. Each paper contained a specific address. Upon further investigation, it turned out that the handwriting on the first paper matched that found in her documents, as if someone had prepared that paper to keep her constantly informed of that marina's address. The sentence also described the same marina where the police found the mother's car. In the last sentence, a description of a yacht was mentioned, though the description was not accurate. It was written in blue and white, and most boats sailing from that marina are white with blue accents, which meant that this description did not help much. That marina was a small area not intended for docking boats but was exclusively reserved for mooring yachts used for tourist transfers and organizing boat tours to enjoy the scenery, given that the area was a well-known tourist spot. It is possible that the owner of the yacht belonging to the mother and her daughters noticed the sea's atmosphere, and perhaps he was the perpetrator who provided the description of the victims. However, the second paper was not written in the mother's handwriting but in a different style, and it contained the address of the hotel where they were staying, indicating that someone else had provided that address. His identity remains unknown due to the distinct handwriting and the lack of any trace linking him to the location. Nevertheless, the investigators were unable to reach him, as no clues or evidence were found, even though most yacht owners in that marina use white boats with blue details. After the police returned to their headquarters, news spread among the marina workers. Some warned each other that the perpetrator might be working among them. Shortly thereafter, they received a report from some workers at the same location, stating that a man working on his yacht was giving tourists illegal boat tours without the proper license. The police then went to a site about 10 kilometers away from the marina, where they knocked on a door. The man answered, clearly surprised, not expecting the police to come to his house. The police entered his house and thoroughly searched it, then proceeded to the yard where they found his yacht. The yacht was positioned next to some metal structures and planted trees, which caused further astonishment. The police stated that the perpetrator had tied the victims on the sides of the yacht using ropes and weights so that their bodies would remain at the bottom of the sea and not float. However, when comparing the condition of the yacht found with that where the victims' bodies were discovered, it turned out that they did not match. No fingerprints or evidence linking his yacht to the crime were found, nor were there any phone calls or other evidence connecting him to the incident. When reviewing the documents, the investigators found no match in the handwriting compared to that found on the note discovered in the victim's car. Surprisingly, the date of the crime according to the forensic report did not match what the suspect Jason provided on that day. He claimed a prolonged absence that lasted several months. At the same time he was being interrogated, a young woman arrived at the police station crying at night, visibly in a deteriorated mental state. When questioned, she reported that she had been assaulted by a man who owned a yacht at the marina. The witness, a female bystander, said at the very same marina where tourists dock before beginning their boat tour, that is, at the same marina where the victim's car was found. When did this happen? She replied, today, specifically at sunset. She then provided further details. She explained that she was walking along the shoreline with her friends when a man approached and said, "I organized boat tours for tourists. Would you like me to take you on my boat so you can watch the sunset from the middle of the sea?" The police asked her, "Did you go with that man?" She answered, "I went with him alone, but my friend refused." After they left the shore, the man threatened her and overpowered her, and when darkness fell he dropped her off at the shore, saying, "Continue on your way, I'll leave you at the hotel." When she arrived at the hotel, the police inquired, "Did you notice any boat or yacht on his vessel?" She replied, "Yes, he is both a boat and a yacht." The officers then asked, "What color is the boat?" She said, "It's yellow." At that point, the police became convinced that Jason had nothing to do with the case, and that he had acted in a detached manner. The investigators continued searching for the real perpetrator. They returned once again to the marina but found no one responsive, as everyone docking at the marina followed a certain pattern, and they monitored the area for 24 hours. 24 hours passed without the perpetrator being found. The investigators and police published approximate photos of the suspect along with a description of the assaulted girl, noting that anyone with information about him would receive a substantial monetary reward. However, 1 year passed, then 2 years, then 3 years without any results. The perpetrator remained unknown, and perhaps he had vanished among several people or into the depths of the sea. One day, one of the investigators decided to search the criminal files, focusing especially on recent cases, with particular attention to the file of the case involving the mother who was disposed of along with her daughters. During the investigation, the investigators noticed that the handwriting used by the suspect was distinctive, a unique style. They then took the bold step of publishing an image of that handwriting on all the streets of the city and surrounding areas. The advertisement stated, "Whoever recognizes the owner of this handwriting and provides information leading to his arrest will receive a reward of $25,000. It was believed that Roger was the father who had coldly abandoned his wife and daughters, as a woman who had passed by on the street noticed the advertisement that the police had posted. The woman approached the police station and stated that she recognized that handwriting. She explained that the distinctive handwriting of a contractor named Oba, who works in the neon field, appeared on an invoice she possessed, which matched the handwriting on the note found in the victim's car. In this way, the investigators collected all available information about the suspect and summoned him to the interrogation center, where photos of the woman and her daughters were presented, and he was asked why he had not provided any information about his wife and daughter. He replied succinctly that he did not know them and that he was not the perpetrator, as if his busy daily schedule on the farm and at the restaurant kept him from having any connection with the victims. Later, a man named Jason appeared, and when the police asked him why he had contacted the victims, he responded, "How should I know? I have nothing to do with them, and I am not the perpetrator. I left my problems behind to live a free life." The investigators explained to him that his behavior did not match the evidence, especially since he had entered the marina without a permit to organize an illegal boat tour. When questioned about the yacht in his yard, he stated that he only used it for personal purposes. The investigators tried every possible means with him, and although he provided a partial confession, they were unable to gather conclusive evidence against him. It turned out that his yacht did not match the one on which the bound bodies of the victims were found, nor were there any phone records or documents linking him to the crime. Furthermore, upon reviewing the documents, they found no match in the handwriting between what he had written on the invoice and the other documents found in the victim's car. Additionally, the date indicated in the forensic report for the crime did not correspond with what Jason claimed, as he alleged a prolonged absence lasting several months. During the same period, a girl arrived at the police station crying at night in a severely deteriorated mental state, and she reported that she had been assaulted by a man who owned a yacht at the marina. Authorities observed that the sale date was about 3 days after the assault on that girl, and they had already suspected that the perpetrator was the same individual, as the approximate sketch resembled him. However, witness testimonies alone were insufficient, so the investigators gathered evidence to prove his involvement. They brought the girl in and provided her with numerous photographs, including one of the location where the incident occurred. She confirmed, "This is his picture," to further verify the identity of the offender, and at that location, he was identified while the girl was in a state of severe panic. Despite all this evidence, the perpetrator continued to deny his involvement, stating, "I am innocent," and he showed no reaction indicative of having committed the crime. Nevertheless, he swore that he had committed no wrongdoing. Following an investigation conducted with him and his wife reported that she had recently moved from her home and that her husband, who had been harassed, informed her that he had found a better house for her. In that context, investigations revealed that the sale of his property took place 1 day after the assault, and the phone call log further strengthened the evidence by showing that he spoke with his wife, saying, "I have encountered a problem with my yacht, and therefore I will not be able to come until tomorrow." This call was made on the same night that the 3 victims were disposed of. Based on this conclusive evidence and other details presented to the court, a death sentence was issued against the perpetrator using the electric chair. However, the perpetrator persisted in court, stating, "I am innocent." Although he partially confessed, he did not fully confess, which resulted in an extension of the execution period. The sentence remained suspended from 1992 until 2011. Remarkably, for years after the sentence was executed, specifically in 2015, investigators began reviewing old files whose mysteries had yet to be solved, as part of forensic scientific research. New developments related to DNA analysis emerged, prompting investigators to re-examine files concerning the assaults and disposal. They revisited cases in the same state until they found a woman in her 20s who had been assaulted by someone resembling the perpetrator in 1990. Upon matching the DNA sample from the victim's file, it turned out that the sample belonged to the same perpetrator who had assaulted the mother and her 2 daughters, and for whom the sentence was carried out in 2011, bringing the total number of victims to 4. However, there are still suspicions that another person or persons might be involved, although the evidence has not yet confirmed this. In the latest developments, it appears that the case has been closed for now. If you have any comments or inquiries regarding this case, please share them on the channel, hit the like button, and leave a comment. Thank you and take care.